Hello, dear listeners, and welcome back to our quiet corner of stories. Tales that settle into your heart like a warm blanket on a chilly day. Stories that heal, comfort, and remind us that even in the shadows, there is a light worth reaching for. Tonight, I am taking you to the misty hills of Asheville, North Carolina, where a small radio station hums under a velvet sky, its faded sign glowing faintly against the night. Inside a cramped studio, bathed in golden light, sits Clarence Whitaker, a man whose voice has carried thousands through their darkest hours, yet whose own heart aches with unspoken regrets. This is Night Waves, a journey through 30 final evenings, where voices rise, hearts mend, and a father learns to reach for his lost son. So, settle in, wrap your hands around something warm, and let us step into the dark. The air in Asheville carried the scent of rain and pine as Clarence Whitaker climbed the creaky stairs to the radio station on a cool April evening. At 74, his steps were slower now, each one a quiet testament to the years spent in this town, in this building, in this life. His gray hair, thinning but neatly combed, caught the dim light of the hallway bulb, and his brown eyes, etched with lines of laughter and loss, scanned the familiar walls. Photographs hung crookedly, images of the station's heyday, when vinyl records spun and laughter filled the air. Now the paint peeled, and the silence pressed in, broken only by the distant hum of a generator. Clarence paused at the studio door, his hand resting on the worn knob. This was his sanctuary, his home for over 40 years, but tonight it felt different. Tonight, he carried a weight heavier than the years. Inside, the studio was a time capsule. A single bulb cast a warm glow over the cluttered desk, where a chipped coffee mug sat beside a stack of jazz CDs. The microphone, its silver scratched and dull, stood like an old friend, waiting. A control panel blinked with green and red lights, its buttons smoothed by decades of touch. Beyond the desk, a window framed the dark hills of Asheville, their outlines softened by mist. Clarence inhaled deeply, catching the faint smell of aged wood and dust, a scent that grounded him. He slid into his chair, the leather creaking under his weight, and ran his fingers over the microphone. For a moment, he was 34 again, young and hopeful, launching Night Waves with his wife Ellen by his side, her smile brighter than the studio lights. Ellen. The thought of her tightened his chest. She had been his first listener, calling in during that inaugural broadcast to say she loved his voice. They married a year later, built a life in Asheville, raised their son Daniel. But 10 years ago, cancer stole her away, leaving Clarence with only memories and the radio. Night Waves became his refuge, a place to lose himself in the stories of others, to feel needed. Every night from 10 in the evening to 2 in the morning, he opened the lines, inviting strangers to share their joys, their sorrows, their secrets. His voice, deep and steady like a river, drew them in, and his listening, patient and kind, held them close. To thousands across Asheville, most over 50, he was more than a host. He was a friend, a confidant, a beacon in the loneliness of night. But yesterday, the station manager, a weary man named Tom, delivered news that shattered Clarence's world. The station, bleeding money for years, would close in 1 month. 30 days, 30 broadcasts, and Night Waves would fade into silence. Tom had apologized, his voice heavy, but Clarence barely heard him. He saw Ellen's face, heard Daniel's laughter, felt the weight of every story he had carried. How could he let go of this? How could he lose the one place where he still mattered? He spent the day walking Asheville's streets, past coffee shops with glowing signs, art galleries with vibrant canvases, parks where musicians played under oak trees. The town pulsed with life, a blend of old charm and new energy, but Clarence felt adrift, a man out of time, Now, in the studio, he pushed the thought of closure away. He had decided these final 30 nights would be his legacy. Each broadcast would honor the listeners, their stories weaving a tapestry of healing that might outlast the station. He flipped a switch, and a soft jazz melody filled the room, a saxophone weaving notes like threads of moonlight. Clarence leaned toward the microphone, his voice steady despite the ache in his heart. Good evening, Asheville. This is Night Waves, and I am Clarence Whitaker, here to listen, here to share. Our lines are open. What is on your mind tonight? The first call came 10 minutes later, the phone line blinking red. Clarence pressed a button, his heart lifting as it always did when a voice waited on the other end. Hello, you are on Night Waves. Who is this? A woman's voice, soft but trembling, answered. My name is Martha. I am 68, and I live just outside town. Clarence smiled, picturing her in a cozy kitchen, maybe with a cat curled nearby. Welcome, Martha. What brings you here tonight? Martha's story spilled out slowly, like water from a cracked cup. She spoke of her friend Joan, who had died of cancer 2 years ago. They had been close for decades, sharing coffee mornings and long talks. But when Joan got sick, Martha struggled to visit, overwhelmed by fear and her own grief. She never said thank you for all Joan had meant to her, never said goodbye. Now, the regret gnawed at her, keeping her awake. I wish I had told her how much I loved her, Martha said, her voice breaking. I wish I had been braver. Clarence listened, his eyes fixed on the hills beyond the window. He saw Ellen in his mind, her hand in his during her final days, her smile weak but warm. He had said everything to her, but the memory of Martha's regret stirred another pain. Daniel, his son, now 45, somewhere far from Asheville. 15 years ago, they had argued bitterly. Daniel, then 30, accused Clarence of choosing the radio over family, of being absent even when he was home. You were never there, Dad. Not for Mom. Not for me, Daniel had shouted, his eyes blazing. He left that night, slamming the door, and Clarence had not heard from him since. The silence was a wound that never healed. Martha, Clarence said gently, thank you for sharing Joan with us. Regret is heavy, but your love for her shines through. Maybe tonight, by telling her story, you are saying that thank you. Maybe she hears you still. Martha sniffled, her voice steadier. I hope so. Thank you, Clarence. You make it easier to breathe. They spoke a little longer, and when the call ended, Clarence sat back, his hands trembling. Martha's story was a mirror, reflecting his own unspoken apologies. He needed to reach Daniel, to say he was sorry, but fear held him back. What if Daniel refused to listen? The jazz played on, filling the silence. Clarence glanced at the clock, 11 in the evening. 3 hours left in the broadcast, and more calls would come. He thought of his listeners, scattered across Asheville, in homes lit by soft lamps, in cars parked under streetlights, and diners with jukeboxes humming. They were his community, his family, many carrying burdens like his own. Loneliness, loss, dreams left behind. For them, and for himself, he would make these 30 nights count. Each story would be a wave, rippling out, touching hearts, maybe even reaching Daniel. Outside, the mist thickened, cloaking Asheville's hills. The station's sign flickered, casting a faint glow on the wet pavement. Clarence sipped his coffee, the bitterness grounding him. He leaned forward, his voice warm and sure. This is Night Waves, and we are just getting started. Our lines are open. Who is next? The phone line blinked again, and Clarence's heart lifted. Another story waited, Another chance to listen, to heal, to hope. In this small studio, under the golden light, the night was alive, and so was he. The rain had stopped by the second night, leaving Asheville draped in a soft mist that clung to the hills like a whispered secret. Clarence Whitaker sat in the familiar leather chair, its creak a quiet greeting as he settled into the studio. The golden light from the single bulb bathed the room, casting shadows over the scratched microphone and the blinking control panel. He sipped coffee from his chipped mug, the bitter warmth steadying his hands. Outside, the dark hills loomed through the window, their outlines softened by the fog. The air smelled of damp wood and old vinyl, a scent that wrapped around him like a memory. He flipped a switch, and a jazz piano melody drifted through the speakers, its notes slow and mournful, setting the tone for another evening of night waves. Clarence leaned toward the microphone, his voice deep and steady. "Good evening, Asheville. This is Night Waves, and I am Clarence Whitaker, here to listen, here to share. Our lines are open. What is on your mind tonight?" The first call came early, the red light on the phone line flickering like a heartbeat. Clarence pressed the button, his heart lifting as it always did when a new voice waited. "Hello, you are on Night Waves. Who is this?" A gravelly voice answered, heavy with years. "My name is George. I am 72, a retired truck driver, calling from a little house just north of town." Clarence pictured him, a man with weathered hands, maybe sitting in a worn armchair, a photo of family nearby. "Welcome, George. What brings you here tonight?" George spoke slowly, his words carrying the weight of decades. He told of his daughter, Emily, now 40, living in Charlotte. For years, he drove long hauls across the country, chasing paychecks to keep his family afloat. But those years meant missing Emily's birthdays, her school plays, her quiet moments. She grew up, and a distance grew with her, a wall built of missed calls and empty promises. "I thought I was doing right by her, providing," George said, his voice thick. "But she needed her dad, not just money. Last week, I called her. I said I was sorry for all those years I was not there. She cried, I cried, and we talked for hours." Clarence listened, his eyes tracing the grain of the wooden desk. He saw his son Daniel in his mind, 15 years gone, his angry words echoing, "You're never there, Dad." George continued, "I wanted to share this because it is not too late. If you have someone you have hurt, call them. Say you are sorry. It can change everything." Clarence's throat tightened. He thought of the letter he had started writing to Daniel after Martha's call last night, words scratched on a notepad, but not yet sent. "Thank you, George," he said, his voice soft. "Your story reminds us that apologies can bridge even the widest gaps. I am glad you and Emily found your way back." They spoke a little longer, George's voice lighter by the end, and when the call disconnected, Clarence sat back, his fingers brushing the notepad in his pocket. George's courage stirred something in him, a flicker of resolve, but fear still lingered. What if Daniel did not want to hear from him? The jazz piano faded, replaced by a saxophone's gentle hum. Clarence glanced at the clock, 10:45 in the evening. The night stretched ahead, and the studio felt alive, its warmth a contrast to the chilly mist outside. He thought of his listeners, tuning in from homes with glowing windows, from cars parked on quiet streets, from diners where coffee steamed in mugs. They were out there, carrying their own regrets, their own hopes. He leaned forward. "This is Night Waves, and we are here for you. Who is next?" The second call came just past 11, the line blinking again. "Hello, you are on Night Waves. Who is this? A woman's voice, bright but tinged with nervousness, answered. My name is Susan. I am 65, a retired teacher, calling from downtown Asheville. Clarence smiled, imagining her in one of the town's artsy lofts, surrounded by books. Welcome, Susan. What is on your mind tonight? Susan's story unfolded like a painting, vivid and layered. She spoke of her childhood dream to be an artist, sketching landscapes in her backyard, dreaming of galleries. But life had other plans: marriage, children, a teaching career that filled her days. The dream faded, buried under lesson plans and laundry. After retiring, she felt lost, her purpose gone. Then, a month ago, she joined a painting class at a community center. I was terrified, she said, laughing softly. My hands shook holding the brush. But now, I paint every day. I am not giving up again. Clarence listened, his eyes drifting to a dusty notebook on the shelf, where he once jotted ideas for a book about Asheville's stories. He had dreamed of writing it, but the radio always came first. Susan's voice grew firm. I want to tell anyone listening, your dreams do not expire. Pick them up, no matter how old you are. Clarence's chest warmed. Thank you, Susan. Your courage is a gift to us all. It reminds us to hold tight to what makes us feel alive. They talked a bit more, Susan sharing her plans for an art show, and when the call ended, Clarence stared at the notebook. Susan's story was a spark, igniting a longing he had buried. Maybe, after the station closed, he could write again. The thought felt fragile, but it lingered, glowing softly in the quiet studio. The jazz shifted to a slow bass line, its rhythm like a heartbeat. Outside, Asheville's streets glistened under streetlights, the mist curling around brick buildings and neon signs. Clarence sipped his coffee, the mug's warmth seeping into his palms. He thought of the town beyond the hills, coffee shops where artists sketched, parks where couples strolled, galleries where paintings hung like windows to the soul. Night Waves was part of that tapestry, a thread connecting strangers through the airwaves. He leaned toward the microphone. This is Night Waves, and our lines are open. Who is next? The third call came near midnight, the phone line steady and bright. Hello, you are on Night Waves. Who is this? A man's voice, quiet but warm, answered. My name is Raymond. I am 70, a retired carpenter, calling from a trailer park south of town. Clarence pictured him, a man with calloused hands, maybe whittling wood on a porch. Welcome, Raymond. What brings you here tonight? Raymond's story was a soft ache, like a bruise pressed gently. He spoke of his wife, Clara, who died 3 years ago after a stroke. The loss left him hollow, his days blurring into gray. I stopped talking to folks, stopped smiling, he said. But last year, I started volunteering at a food bank, handing out groceries, seeing people's faces light up. It brought me back. I found joy again, even without her. Clarence listened, his thoughts drifting to Ellen. Her absence was a shadow he carried, but Raymond's words stirred a memory. Ellen's laughter when they volunteered at a shelter, her joy in small acts. Raymond's voice steadied. I want to say, if you are hurting, help someone. It heals you too, Clarence's eyes stung. Thank you, Raymond. Your story shows us that light can grow in the darkest places. They spoke longer, Raymond sharing stories of the people he met at the food bank, and when the call ended, Clarence felt a shift. He thought of a young intern at the station, Mia, struggling with the equipment. Maybe he could teach her, share what he knew. The idea felt small but right, a way to give back. Like Raymond had, the jazz played on, a trumpet weaving through the melody. The clock showed 1 in the morning. the broadcast nearing its end. Clarence looked out at the hills, their shapes faint in the mist. He thought of his listeners, their radios humming in quiet rooms, their hearts open to the stories. George, Susan, Raymond, each voice was a wave, rippling through the night, touching him, changing him. He leaned forward, his voice warm. This is Night Waves, and we will be back tomorrow. Keep sharing, keep listening. Good night. Asheville. As the music faded, Clarence switched off the microphone. The studio fell silent, save for the hum of the equipment. He pulled the notepad from his pocket, the letter to Daniel unfinished. George's apology, Susan's dream, Raymond's joy. They were threads, weaving a path toward courage. He wrote a line. Daniel, I am sorry for not being the father you needed. His hand paused, the words heavy but true. He did not know if he would send it, but for now, it was enough to write. Outside, the mist swirled, and Asheville slept under a starless sky. Clarence stood, his joints stiff, and looked around the studio, the microphone, the coffee mug, the window framing the hills. This was his home for 28 more nights. He turned off the light, the golden glow fading, and stepped into the cool air, carrying the voices of the night with him. The mist had lifted by the 10th night, and Asheville sparkled under a sky dusted with stars. Clarence Whitaker eased into his leather chair, the studio's golden light wrapping him in its familiar glow. The air carried the scent of fresh coffee and old wood, mingling with the faint hum of the control panel. Outside, the hills stood sharp against the night, their curves framed by the studio window. Clarence's fingers brushed the microphone, its worn surface a quiet comfort. He flipped a switch, and a jazz guitar melody flowed through the speakers, its notes soft and winding, like a river under moonlight. He leaned forward, his voice warm and steady. Good evening, Asheville. This is Night Waves, and I am Clarence Whitaker, here to listen, here to share. Our lines are open. What is on your mind tonight? The phone line blinked red within minutes, a signal of another story waiting. Clarence pressed the button, his heart stirring with anticipation. Hello, you are on Night Waves. Who is this? A woman's voice, calm but threaded with resolve, answered. My name is Lydia. I am 67, a gardener, calling from a cottage west of town. Clarence pictured her, hands dusted with soil, a porch lined with potted plants. Welcome, Lydia. What brings you here tonight? Lydia's story unfolded like a vine, steady and rooted. She spoke of her father, a man consumed by alcohol, whose anger cast shadows over her childhood. He was gone now, dead for 20 years, but the hurt lingered, a knot she could not untie. Last spring, she started a garden, planting roses and lavender, each bloom a small act of care. As the flowers grew, she found herself forgiving him, not for his sake, but for her own. Forgiving does not erase the past, she said, her voice firm, but it frees you to live. I plant every day now, and I feel lighter. Clarence listened, his eyes tracing the studio's wooden walls. He thought of Daniel, the pain of their argument, the years of silence. Was he angry at Daniel, or at himself for failing as a father? Lydia's words settled in him, a seed of possibility. Thank you, Lydia, he said, his voice gentle. Your garden is a lesson. Forgiveness can grow where pain once stood. They spoke longer, Lydia sharing the joy of her blooming roses, and when the call ended, Clarence felt a quiet shift. He needed to forgive himself before he could reach Daniel. The jazz guitar faded, replaced by a slow piano, its chords heavy with longing. Clarence sipped his coffee, the mug's warmth grounding him. He glanced at the notepad in his pocket, where his letter to Daniel grew, line by painful line. Lydia's story had added a new one. I forgive myself for not knowing how to be better. The words felt raw, but writing them eased the ache in his chest. He looked out at the hills, their dark shapes steady under the stars. Asheville hummed beyond the window, streets lined with brick storefronts, cafes glowing with soft light, parks where fireflies danced. His listeners were out there, in homes with creaking floors, in cars with radios glowing, their hearts open to the night. He leaned toward the microphone. This is Night Waves, and we are here for you. Who is next? The second call came just before 11, the line blinking steadily. Hello, you are on Night Waves. Who is this? A man's voice, rich and weathered, answered. My name is Eugene. I am 75, a retired musician, calling from an apartment downtown. Clarence imagined him, fingers calloused from guitar strings, a record player spinning nearby. Welcome, Eugene. What is on your mind tonight? Eugene's story was a melody, warm and unexpected. He spoke of losing his wife 15 years ago, believing his heart would never love again. But last year, at a jazz club in Asheville, he met Rose, a 70-year-old widow with a laugh like sunlight. They danced, talked, fell in love. I thought I was too old for this, he said, chuckling. But love does not care about age. It finds you when you least expect it. Clarence's throat tightened. He saw Ellen's face, her eyes bright during their late-night dances in the living room. Her love still lived in him, but Eugene's story sparked a new hope. Maybe his heart could open again, not to romance, but to Daniel. Thank you, Eugene, he said, his voice thick. Your story reminds us that love is timeless, whether for a partner or a family. They talked more, Eugene sharing tales of his gigs and Rose's love for swing dancing, and when the call ended, Clarence felt lighter. He added to his letter, Daniel, I love you, and I want you to know that, no matter the years, the jazz piano softened, a trumpet weaving in, its notes high and clear. Clarence glanced at the clock, 11:30 in the evening. The studio felt like a cocoon, its golden light a shield against the dark. He thought of his listeners, their radios humming in quiet spaces, a nurse finishing a shift, a widower sipping tea, a retiree staring at old photos. Night Waves was their sanctuary, and tonight Clarence felt it too. He leaned forward. This is Night Waves, and our lines are open. Who is next? The third call came near midnight, the phone line glowing red. Hello, you are on Night Waves. Who is this? A woman's voice, steady, but tinged with emotion, answered. My name is Clara. I am 69, a retired nurse, calling from a house near the river. Clarence pictured her, silver hair, a quilt over her lap, the river's murmur outside. Welcome, Clara. What brings you here tonight? Clara's story was a bridge, spanning years of distance. She spoke of her younger sister, Diane, who left home after a falling out over their parents' estate. For a decade, they did not speak, pride keeping them apart. But last month, Clara found an old letter from Diane, tucked in a drawer. She called her sister, and they met, crying, laughing, rebuilding. Family is where you return, no matter how long you have been gone, she said, her voice warm. I want to tell everyone, reach out. Do not wait. Clarence's heart thudded. Daniel's face flashed in his mind, his angry departure 15 years ago. Clara's story was a mirror, reflecting his own longing. Thank you, Clara, he said, his voice trembling. Your story is a reminder that family waits, if we are brave enough to return. They spoke longer, Clara sharing memories of her sister's laugh, and when the call ended, Clarence pulled out his notepad. He wrote, "Daniel, I am waiting for you. Come home." The jazz trumpet soared, then softened, the melody fading into silence. Clarence looked around the studio, the chipped mug, the blinking lights, the window framing the starry hills. For the first time, he felt the urge to share his own story. He leaned toward the microphone, his voice quieter than usual. "Tonight, I want to tell you something about me. I have a son, Daniel. We have not spoken in 15 years, and I miss him every day. Your stories, Lydia, Eugene, Clara, they are helping me find my way back to him. Thank you for that." The words hung in the air, raw and true. He paused, then added, "This is Night Waves, and we will keep going." Who is next? The calls continued, each voice adding to the night's tapestry, but Clarence felt different now. His vulnerability had opened a door, and the listeners responded. By the next night, letters arrived at the station, handwritten notes from people across Asheville, thanking him for sharing, for listening, for being their voice in the dark. One letter from a woman named Ruth read, "Your story about your son touched me. I called my daughter after years of silence. Keep going, Clarence." He tucked the letters into a drawer, their words a quiet strength. Outside, Asheville glowed under the stars. Cafes stayed open late, their windows steaming with warmth, where listeners gathered to talk about night waves. In a diner, a group of retirees shared stories inspired by the show. In a park, a couple tuned in on a portable radio, holding hands. The town was alive, connected by Clarence's voice, by the waves rippling through the night. He ended the broadcast at 2 in the morning, the jazz fading to silence. Good night, Asheville. We will be back tomorrow. Keep sharing. Keep listening. As he switched off the microphone, the studio's hum settled into quiet. Clarence stood, his joints stiff, and looked at the notepad. The letter to Daniel was longer now, a map of his heart. He did not know if he would send it, but each word brought him closer. He turned off the light, the golden glow fading, and stepped into the starry night, the voices of Lydia, Eugene, and Clara echoing in his soul. The air in Asheville was crisp on the 30th night, the sky a deep velvet pierced by a crescent moon. Clarence Whitaker climbed the familiar stairs to the radio station, his steps heavy with the weight of finality. At 74, he felt every creak of the old building, every groan of the wooden steps, as if they too knew this was the end. The faded sign outside flickered, its glow a faint heartbeat against the dark. Inside the studio, the golden light from the single bulb bathed the room, illuminating the worn microphone, the chipped coffee mug, the blinking control panel. The scent of aged wood and fresh coffee lingered, a quiet comfort. Beyond the window, the hills of Asheville stood silent, their curves softened by moonlight. Clarence settled into his leather chair, its creak a farewell, and ran his fingers over the microphone. Tonight was the last broadcast of Night Waves, and his heart ached with both sorrow and gratitude. He flipped a switch, and a jazz saxophone filled the room, its notes slow and tender, like a hand reaching out. He leaned forward, his voice deep and steady. "Good evening, Asheville. This is Night Waves, and I am Clarence Whitaker, here for our final night. Our lines are open. What is on your mind tonight?" Clarence paused, his eyes tracing the studio's familiar lines. The scratched desk, the stack of jazz CDs, the window framing the quiet hills. For 29 nights, he had carried the stories of strangers, their voices weaving a tapestry of healing that had changed him. Martha's regret, George's apology, Susan's rediscovered dream, Raymond's quiet joy, Lydia's forgiveness, Eugene's late love, Clara's family reunion. Each had chipped away at his own walls, urging him toward Daniel, his son, lost to him for 15 years. The notepad in his pocket held a letter, unfinished but heavy with truth. Daniel, I am sorry. I love you. I am waiting. Tonight, he would speak those words aloud, unsure if Daniel was listening, but certain he could no longer hold them in. He leaned toward the microphone, his voice softer now, trembling with vulnerability. Before we open the lines, I want to share something. This program, Night Waves, has been my home for 40 years. It began with a woman named Ellen, my wife, who called in on our first night to say she loved my voice. We built a life together, raised a son, Daniel. But I was not the father I should have been. I chose this microphone over him, and 15 years ago, he left angry, hurt. I lost Ellen 10 years ago, and Daniel long before that. These past 29 nights, your stories have shown me what I need to say. Daniel, if you are out there, I am sorry. I love you, and I will always be here waiting. Clarence's throat tightened, his eyes stinging. He paused, the saxophone's notes filling the silence, then added, now, let us hear from you. Who is first tonight? The phone lines lit up, red lights blinking like stars. Clarence pressed a button, his heart lifting despite the ache. Hello, you are on Night Waves. Who is this? A woman's voice, warm and familiar, answered. It is Martha, Clarence, from that first night. I am 68, calling from outside town. Clarence smiled, picturing her cozy kitchen, her cat curled nearby. Welcome back, Martha. What is on your mind? Martha's voice was steady now, lighter than before. She spoke of her friend Joan, the regret she shared 29 nights ago. After that call, she visited Joan's grave, spoke her thank you aloud, and felt a weight lift. I have been listening every night since, she said. Your voice, these stories, they have kept me going. I want to thank you, Clarence, for giving us this space. Clarence's chest warmed. Thank you, Martha. Your courage started this journey. You have given me more than you know. They spoke a little longer, Martha sharing her plans to volunteer at a hospice. And when the call ended, Clarence felt the studio pulse with connection. The calls kept coming, a flood of voices from Asheville's heart. A man named Thomas, 71, thanked Clarence for inspiring him to write to his brother after years of silence. A woman, Ellen, 66, named after Clarence's wife, shared how Night Waves helped her grieve her husband, finding solace in the shared stories. Each voice was a thread, weaving a legacy that would outlast the station. Clarence listened, his responses gentle, his heart full. The jazz played on, a trumpet now, its notes high and clear like a beacon in the night. He glanced at the clock, 1:30 in the morning. The end was near, and a quiet fear crept in. Would Daniel hear him? Would these waves reach his son? Who is this? A man's voice, hesitant but familiar, answered. Dad, it is me, Daniel. I am 45, calling from Raleigh. Clarence's breath caught, his hand gripping the microphone. The studio seemed to shrink, the golden light brighter, the hills outside still. Daniel, his son. Welcome, Daniel, he said, his voice trembling. I am so glad you are here. Daniel's words came slowly, each one heavy with years. I have been listening every night this month, Dad. I found Night Waves by accident, flipping through stations. Your voice, it was like coming home. The stories, Martha, George, Clara, they made me see what I was holding on to. I was angry, hurt, but I was wrong to leave like that. I am sorry. Clarence's eyes filled, tears tracing his cheeks. He saw Daniel as a boy, laughing in their backyard, Then, as a man, his face hardened by their fight. "Daniel, I am the one who is sorry. I was not there when you needed me. I love you, always have, always will." Daniel's voice broke. "I love you too, Dad. I want to come back to talk, to try again." They spoke, their words raw and heartfelt, spilling over the airwaves. Daniel shared memories, fishing trips, Ellen's bedtime stories, moments Clarence thought were lost. Clarence told Daniel about Ellen's love for the show, her pride in their family. Listeners across Asheville tuned in homes with glowing lamps, in cars parked under streetlights, in diners where coffee grew cold. Many cried, their own hearts stirred by the reunion. In a cafe downtown, a group of regulars raised their mugs, toasting silently. In a park, a couple held hands, tears on their faces. The waves of night waves carried Clarence and Daniel's love, rippling through the town. The clock showed 1:55 in the morning. Clarence wiped his eyes, his voice steadying. "Daniel, thank you for calling, for coming back. This is what Night Waves is about. Finding each other, healing, starting again." He paused, then turned to his listeners. "To all of you, thank you for your stories, your courage, your hearts. This may be our last night, but your voices will keep ringing. Tell your stories, share your light, because every story is a wave, and they will never stop." The jazz swelled, a saxophone soaring, and Clarence leaned back. "Good night, Asheville. Keep listening, keep sharing." He switched off the microphone, the studio falling silent. The golden light flickered, as if reluctant to fade. Clarence sat, the weight of 40 years lifting, replaced by a quiet peace. Daniel's voice echoed in his heart, a promise of tomorrow. He looked around, the microphone, the coffee mug, the hills beyond the window. This was his home, and tonight it had held a miracle. He stood, his joints stiff, and turned off the light, the glow fading into darkness. Outside, Asheville shimmered under the moon, its streets alive with the echoes of night waves, carrying healing, love, and hope into the night. The radio station stood silent under the Asheville sun, its faded sign no longer flickering, its doors locked for good. Clarence Whitaker walked past it one last time, his gray hair catching the April light, his brown eyes tracing the peeling paint. At 74, he felt the weight of 40 years in that building, but also a lightness, as if the stories of night waves had lifted a burden from his heart. The air smelled of blooming dogwoods and fresh earth, and the hills beyond the town glowed green under a cloudless sky. 2 weeks had passed since the final broadcast, since Daniel's call, since the waves of healing rippled through Asheville. Today, the community had called Clarence to a park downtown, a gathering to honor what night waves had meant. He adjusted his jacket, his steps steady but slow, and headed toward the park, a small notebook in his pocket, its pages filled with new words, a new dream. The park hummed with life as Clarence arrived, its grassy expanse framed by oak trees and wildflowers. Hundreds of people filled the space, their voices a warm chorus under the golden afternoon light. Tables held lemonade and cookies, children ran with kites, and a folk band played softly, their banjo notes dancing in the breeze. At the center, a wooden frame stood, covered with handwritten signs, each one a story from night waves, a testament to the program's reach. Clarence paused, his chest tightening at the sight. The signs bore names he knew: Martha, George, Susan, Raymond, Lydia, Eugene, Clara. Their words, shared over 30 nights, had woven a tapestry that now shimmered in the sunlight. A wall of shared healing. A woman approached, her silver hair tied back, her smile familiar. "Clarence, it is me, Martha," she said, her voice warm. the 68-year-old from the first night, who had carried regret for her friend Joan. She hugged him, her eyes bright. "I brought this," she said, pointing to a sign on the wall. "Say thank you before it is too late. Your show gave me peace, Clarence. I am volunteering at the hospice now, helping others say their goodbyes." Clarence's throat tightened. "Martha, you started this journey. Thank you for trusting me with your story." They talked, Martha sharing how night waves inspired her to plant a garden in Joan's memory, each bloom a quiet thank you. Another voice called out, and Clarence turned to see George, the 72-year-old truck driver, his weathered face creased with a grin. He held a sign, "It is never too late to say sorry." "Clarence, your show got me to call my daughter, Emily. She is visiting next month." Clarence clasped George's hand, his heart full. "George, you gave me courage to reach my son. You did this too." They stood together, reading the wall, signs from listeners Clarence had never met. "I forgave my father. I painted my first canvas. I found love at 70. Each one was a wave, rippling beyond the airwaves, touching lives in ways Clarence had never imagined. We are here to honor Clarence Whitaker and Night Waves, a program that gave Asheville a voice, a heart, a home. She spoke of the letters that poured in after the final broadcast, from listeners who found courage, hope, connection. She turned to Clarence, her eyes shining. "Clarence, you showed us that listening is love. This wall, these stories, they are your legacy." The crowd applauded, their cheers a warm tide, and Clarence felt tears prick his eyes. He stepped to the microphone, his voice steady but thick. "Asheville, you made Night Waves what it was. Your stories healed me, brought my son back, gave me purpose. Thank you for letting me listen." As the applause faded, Clarence's phone buzzed in his pocket. He slipped away to a quiet corner of the park, under an oak tree's shade, and saw Daniel's name on the screen. His heart lifted. "Hello, Daniel," he said, his voice soft. Daniel, now 45, answered from Raleigh, his tone warm. "Dad, I heard about the gathering. I wish I could be there. I am coming to Asheville next week. Can we meet?" Clarence's chest warmed, the promise of their reunion real now. "Daniel, I cannot wait. We have so much to talk about." They spoke for a while, Daniel sharing plans to stay a few days, to walk the hills together, to rebuild what time had taken. When the call ended, Clarence looked across the park, the crowd's laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves. Daniel was coming home, and that was enough. Later, Clarence sat at a picnic table, a notebook open before him. The pages held the beginnings of a book, stories from Night Waves woven with his own. Ellen's love, Daniel's absence, the 30 nights that changed him. Writing had been his dream, buried under years of radio, but Susan's courage, shared weeks ago, had rekindled it. He wrote now, each word a step toward fulfilling that dream, a way to keep the waves alive. The folk band played on, their music a gentle backdrop, and Clarence felt lighter than he had in years. The regret that once weighed him down, the silence of Daniel's absence, had softened, replaced by hope, connection, purpose. As the sun dipped low, painting the hills in gold, the crowd began to disperse, their signs left on the wall, a monument to Night Waves. Clarence stayed, walking the park's paths, the grass soft under his shoes. The air cooled, carrying the scent of pine and earth, and the sky deepened to twilight. He found a bench near a quiet grove, its leaves whispering in the breeze, and pulled a small radio from his bag. He tuned it to a new station, one Mia had told him about, run by a young host named Sam. The signal crackled, then cleared, and a voice came through, warm and eager. "Good evening. Asheville. This is Starlight Stories, and I am Sam, here to listen, here to share. Clarence smiled, his heart full. Sam's voice carried the same spirit, the same promise of connection. Night Waves was gone, but its light lived on, passed hand to hand, voice to voice. So, dear listeners, that is Night Waves. 30 nights in a golden studio, where phones ring, hearts mend, stories rise, and a father finds his son. Martha, George, Susan, Raymond, Lydia, Eugene, Clara lifted Clarence. He lifts Daniel, Mia, Asheville, a light passing hand to hand. What is your studio? Your microphone? Your wave? Thank you for joining me. Until next time, take care and listen close, even when it is faint, even when it is far.